Hey guys, and welcome back to this circus show that is my heads-up match against Sam Lang from RunItOnce.com. Today we're going to be doing part 3 of the 100 PLO heads-up review. Obviously go and watch part 1 and part 2. Even if you're not a fan, they were really interesting matches, and I mean, they were just fun to watch, I guess. There's a lot of chips flying around in them. Table 2 is going to become Table 4 and is a pretty sick hand. You can watch it at the end of part 2 and see the reasoning of why I made such an insane play and turned out to be right. Okay, so on Table 3 here, I open and call it 3-bet, and this flop comes down, and at an SPR of 10, I mean, he's going to c-bet, obviously, and let's say I just don't want to give up. It's good to put pressure back on paired flops in position, because if unless like it's a paired flop that smacks I mean the opponent's range with an unreasonably high frequency. I mean like ace 10 when a guy who 3-bets type 3-bet and c-bets on. It's good to play back often because you're just gonna win more often than not when you're in position on those. That said, if we were shallower, I mean, if I had 3x and call it 3-bet and the SPR was like 4.7 or something like that, I'd like to have a wider floating strategy. At an SPR of 10, it's okay to raise small with a bunch of hands in our range. Because what happens is that like the opponent who's out of position only has 2 tools to play back if we go into air versus air wars. And obviously air versus air wars, sorry for the French accent here, is what's going to be most of both of our ranges on the flop like 10-10-5 rainbow. And villain can only really bet 3-bet or like bet float out of position, which is kind of optimistic often. So if we raise and we get small 3-bets like those, I mean, we're getting 8 into 43, which is about like 5.4 to 1 odds or something. We're getting really good odds on our float. And he has air really often, so then we can just float this with a reasonably high frequency and show up the turn and then decide if we want to float again if he decides to double barrel, and then if he checks, we can stab. Obviously, we can turn showdown value like this here. Also, if we get the turn here and I have 80 into 51, like potting with anything would be horrible for my range. So like my sizing would be more something like 13 or like 15. That also gives me a pretty good press. I mean, total I'm risking what, 8 plus 13, that's 21 to win 43. So the float effectively needs to work like 1 times out of 3 or so much. I could bet call turn, which would be really sick there on Table 3, because I'm fairly certain that any reasonable villain without like insane history is going to bet a lot of his 10s on the turn after bet 3-betting flop or check call them. But like check raising with trips there is just such a rare move, and it's just the turn check raise there when I bet 15 is just going to be so weighed towards draws and other like equity stuff that he just wants me to fold, and he's hoping he has some like 15 or like 20% equity to help against my stack off range. But that said, I mean, I have good showdown value, and a lot of the stuff that bet 3-bets flop, I mean, Sam Lang is definitely smart enough to click back with like aces here, and he can turn a bunch of ace queens because obviously from his 3-bet range, most queens he's are gonna have an ace or a king kicker. So we can just kind of try to check it down and then maybe take a decision on the river if it goes check. The rest of the hand just plays out check, and he shows up with trip 10s. We're going to go back to Table 2. Sorry for spazzing around a bit. Not Table 2, the hand that went all in with the straight on the paired board for like 400 BBs. Well, not 400 actually, it was quite a smaller pot. Okay, so on Table 2 here, I open and I make a really small c-bet on ace queen jack. As I went over in my inducing mistakes video a while ago, I mean, people are usually inelastic to how they react to really small c-bets on most flops. Like, they're gonna go like, oh, this is a small c bet if you bet like 225 into 570, and then play back really often, and then they're gonna play back just the same if you bet 150 into 570. Whereas if you look at the math behind it, they're supposed to play back more often if you bet 150, obviously, but people just don't. So you can play around with that and try to find, I mean, a little edge over people doing this. That's at like 150 into 570 on ace queen jack two tone. I just find it's too small.